Hello and welcome to another Decisions training video. Today we are going to be going over Decisions modules, specifically the Google Cloud module. So we're going to start by talking about what Decisions modules are, and then we're going to go into how to configure the Google Cloud module and how to use it. So first let's go into modules in general. A Decisions module is a downloadable packet that expands the capabilities and introduces new functionalities into the Decisions platform. Typically, these modules are going to help facilitate integration with external platforms, such as Azure, HL7, different message system queues, and many more. Many modules offer pre-built flow steps that you can utilize inside of your flow designer to accomplish specific tasks with those external systems. Notably, there are two categories of default Decisions modules. There are core modules and GitHub modules. So, let's go into the Google Cloud module now. This serves as a connector between various Google Cloud services, enabling streamlined interaction with cloud-based data and functionalities. I want to make that distinction. It's not just the data that's stored in Google Cloud, but the functionalities of Google Cloud as well. There are 6 different step categories that the Google Cloud modules services fall under. You have the administration steps, the BigQuery steps, the document AI steps, the identity steps, the storage steps is probably what you think about when you think of Google Cloud, and the translation steps. All of these I will show where they are located when we get inside of the Decisions environment. If you're looking for details on how to use each individual step, please take a look at our Decisions documentation page and go under the Modules section. I will also include a link to that documentation page in the description of this video. But before we can use those steps, there's a little bit of configuration that needs to be made first. So when you first install this module from the features page in Decisions, you will have to make sure that you have a way to authenticate these services. This is typically done through a JSON file. This JSON file is something that you should be able to fetch from Google Cloud Services itself and use as a way to authenticate Decisions to utilize these services. Now, typically it looks something like this, where you're going to have your service account, the project ID in Google Cloud, your credentials such as the private key ID, the private key. You have to specify the email, client ID, auth URL, and as you can see, there are many other areas as well. Keep in mind that scopes is a list, so you can authorize multiple scopes within this particular JSON file, but you don't necessarily have to, and I'll get into that in a moment. So, when you are trying to set this up inside of Decisions, you want to make sure that you go to the Google Cloud settings after installing the module and then add the credentials into those settings. So you'll be greeted with a screen that looks like this. You'll check the box to use the JSON file, and then you specify the credentials below by uploading that JSON file. Keep in mind, even if you do not check this box, you will still be using JSON credentials, but the default path will most likely be something on the local machines such as app data, roaming, gcloud, application default credentials.json, or a similar path. So when you uncheck that particular box, it's still going to be looking for JSON credentials, just not from the file that you manually upload in these settings. So let me show you how that works, all right? Let's hop into my environment. So here we are inside of my Decisions environment. As with any other module, with the exception of the identity provider modules, we want to go to Administration, Features, and then select the module that we want to install. Here I've already installed the Google Cloud module. However, if you have not already, the way that you would do this is by either going to details of the module and clicking install, or as you can see, most modules allow you to just click the install directly. So after your module has been installed, we then want to add it to our project. So the way that we do that is by navigating to our project. And once we are inside of the project, we drop down Manage, Configuration, and click on Dependencies. Here, we've already added it as a dependency. The way to add it yourself would be to go to Manage, select Modules, and then check the module you want to add as a dependency. After this is done, you will then need to configure the JSON credentials for this module. And the way to do that is by going to the System tab, and we are going to go to Settings this time, not Administration. We're going to scroll down until we see Google Cloud Settings, and then from here, we can edit them. So here, I have checked the box to use the JSON file. I've already created a set of test credentials. However, to create a new one, we would hit the plus button. We would set our display name to be whatever we would like, honestly, test2 creds. And then we would choose the JSON file to upload, which I showed you the layout for in the video earlier. You can also find the layout for this in our documentation site under the module section. So you would upload the JSON, hit OK, and then you have access to those credentials just like I've created here. So that is all the setup that's required. Okay, so now that we have the Google Cloud module configured, let's talk about how to use the steps. When you add the module as a dependency to the project, you will then have access to the Google Cloud steps, which will be found under the Integration tab. Those 6 categories I mentioned earlier are also categorized within the Flow Designer. So you see admin, BigQuery, document AI, identity, storage, and translation. Every step you use is going to ask for the JSON credentials that you uploaded, but not necessarily the file. So, as I was mentioning before, you don't necessarily need to specify the scope for all different services that you need in one JSON credential. Rather, you can upload multiple credentials and choose which one to use for each step. So if we were to go back real quick, here are our test credentials, right? We're going to grab those, and then once we do, we pass them out into one of the flows that we drag on to the Flow Designer. In those properties, you can then select the JSON credentials that you've created from the settings. And there will be a list of these populated with however many credentials you've created. So now let me give you a demonstration of this in our live environment. So here we are back inside of my decisions environment. Let me show you how to utilize these steps. So the way we would do that is we would want to go to a flow. I'm going to go to the storage steps flow that I created here. These are not created by default. So in here, I am using a download object step, which comes from the Google Cloud module, converting that document to a readable PDF, and then showing it on a form. So let me debug this and show you how this works. And it just fetched from our Google Cloud storage a contract. So let me show you where you can find these steps inside of the Flow Designer. You will navigate under here and select Integration. After you've selected Integration, you should see an option that says Google Cloud. Not Google, that's a different set of steps. And then you will see the options under here. So you'll notice that for all of these steps, there are the JSON credentials that need to be selected before you can run it. This is regardless of whichever step you're using inside of the Google Cloud steps. You'll have to make sure this is configured correctly and then refer to the documentation for the precise inputs of the step you're trying to use. These steps should give you a host of options for using Google Cloud inside of Decisions. I want to now go over some of the common errors that you might get if these steps are configured incorrectly. So let's say I were to debug my flow once again. And now we're getting an error. When I check the exception message, I'm going to see something that says invalid grant. Invalid grant, account not found. The input's going to say no data, and then you're going to get more of the error details here. If you see something that says invalid grant, account not found, your first thought should be to check the JSON authorization file in the Google Cloud Module settings. That's because when it's looking for an account, that's where it's going to go to get the account to authorize this particular step. So I'm going to pull up the JSON and let's see what's wrong here. All right, so here we are inside of Visual Studio where I can see a very clear layout of my JSON authorization credentials. And if we see here, the client email is incorrect. When you see the error that we just saw in the Flow Designer, it is very common that the issue is going to be an incorrect email. So let's change this to the right email, save this, and then update our JSON file with this new version in Decisions. All right, I'm back inside of Decisions. We're going to go to our Google Cloud settings, edit, and then we're going to select our credentials, and then we're going to choose the new JSON file that we just updated. So let's drag this over, hit OK, hit OK here, and now let's go back to our flow. And now we rerun this in the debugger. We should see it runs as expected. Another common error that I want to discuss involves the storage steps of the Google Cloud Module. Let's say that you wanted to create a bucket in Google Cloud. I would drag over the Create Bucket step. I would select my JSON credentials, and then I would specify a bucket name. I will call it New Bucket. And then I put in the project ID. So now let's debug this. And when we do that, we see we get an error here. Invalid bucket name, new bucket. And then it takes you to the Google Cloud documentation for bucket naming. So bucket naming has very particular rules around it. And I'm going to go into the documentation now to review those. So here are the rules for bucket naming. Bucket names can only contain lowercase letters, have to start and end with a number or letter, have to contain between 3 to 63 characters unless you're using dots specified up here, in which case it can contain up to 222 as long as those sectioned off are no longer than 63 characters, cannot represent IP address, cannot begin with the Google prefix, and cannot contain the word Google or close misspellings, such as G00GLE. So, when you are trying to create buckets, fetch buckets, and maybe utilize objects and upload them to buckets, keep in mind that these are very much case sensitive. And you will want to make sure that you put in the name correctly. In the case of creating them, that you create a name that falls within these set of rules. If you don't, you'll see this error here. The third common error that I want to cover is actually fixed already with this convert document step. That's why this exists in here, is to fix a common error you might see. Suppose I were to take the downloaded object and simply try to pass it inside of the step here. When I change my input to the file directly and then hit debug, you will notice that I don't see anything here. The reason for that is that when the file is fetched from the Google Cloud site, it does not contain the field file type. This is important for determining how the file is read and handled inside of Decisions. However, when you just use this download object step, you don't get that field. So my workaround is I passed this into a convert document step, which then converted it to a file type and added that file type tag to the decisions file data type. Then when I passed it into my document viewer on my form, it ran correctly. So let me show you what this would look like. So when I pass it into here, I'm taking in my file, I'm passing out converted document, and then right here, I'm going to specify to take in that converted document instead. They're both type file data, but you'll see that file does not contain anything in the file type when it's fetched from the Google Cloud Module step, while converted document will, because it's coming out of the convert document step. So now when I run this as I did at the beginning, here is my document on display. You want to be aware of this when you are fetching objects from the Google Cloud, because that's exactly what it is, an object. And when you get into decisions, it treats it as file data, but you may have to make the proper configurations knowing what the document is that you're trying to fetch from Google Cloud. And that is how you configure and use the Google Cloud module. Thank you very much for watching. Hope it helped.